Hello, and welcome back to Void Whispers. Before we dive in, drop a comment right now and tell me where you're listening from tonight. I read every single one, and it means a lot. Just a quick note, in the first 10 minutes you might see 2 to 3 short ads. After that, the rest of the video is completely ad-free. If you love dark, emotional horror that pulls at your soul, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away, and let's begin. Story 1, Mercy's footsteps struck the snow in a sharp, steady rhythm. At first, the sound was controlled. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Each step broke through the thin crust of ice and sank into the softer snow below. The white landscape stretched around her like an unfinished painting, blank and endless beneath the dark sky. There were no roads, no fences, and no signs of shelter. Only snow, trees, and the black shapes of mountains rising in the distance. Then the footsteps became faster. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Her breathing followed the same rhythm, but it was already beginning to fail. The freezing air cut into her lungs every time she inhaled. It felt as though she were breathing broken glass. Her chest tightened, and each breath came later than it should have, forcing her body to work harder. Still, she ran. Behind her, something moved through the storm. Mercy did not look back. She had already looked once. Once had been enough. The snow fell heavily, filling the air with thick white flurries that twisted in every direction. The wind carried them into her eyes and across her face, making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. The storm had appeared too quickly. Only an hour earlier, the sky had been pale and calm. The snowfall had been gentle, almost beautiful. Mercy had believed she could make it across the mountain pass before dark. She had been wrong. The wind had changed without warning. What had once been soft snow became hard pieces of ice. They struck her cheeks and forehead like tiny stones. The storm screamed through the narrow valley, creating a sound so sharp that it seemed to wake the mountains themselves. Nature had turned against her. Mercy lowered her head and pushed forward. Her legs burned beneath the thick layers of clothing. Sweat covered her back despite the cold, trapped beneath her coat and sweater. Her body felt caught between freezing and overheating. Her boots were heavy with snow. Every step demanded more effort. Her mind screamed at her to stop, but something deeper forced her to continue. She had to reach the ridge. Beyond it, there was supposed to be a ranger station. Warm walls, a radio, a fire. Safety, she focused on those thoughts as she ran. A branch appeared suddenly through the curtain of snow. Mercy tried to avoid it, but her boot struck a hidden patch of ice. She fell hard. Her hands hit the frozen ground first. Pain shot through her wrists and traveled up both arms. Her left knee struck something solid beneath the snow. For a moment, she could not breathe. The storm rushed over her body. She pushed herself up, but her gloved hand slipped. The sharp edge of the buried rock cut through the glove and sliced into her palm. Mercy gasped. Dark blood appeared against the white snow. Steam rose faintly from it. She stared at the small red stain, almost hypnotized by the contrast. The blood looked impossibly bright in the colorless world. Then a sound came from behind her. A long, piercing screech. It rolled through the valley and echoed between the mountains. Mercy's body reacted before her mind could understand. Her heartbeat exploded. A jolt of fear moved through every muscle. She climbed to her feet and ran. The pain in her knee disappeared beneath the sudden rush of adrenaline. Her injured hand throbbed inside the torn glove, but she ignored it. The creature screamed again. Closer, Mercy forced herself not to look back. She had seen it earlier near the tree line. At first, she had mistaken it for a large bird circling above the mountain. It had moved slowly through the clouds, disappearing behind the storm, and then returning. But birds did not have wings that wide. Birds did not cast shadows that covered entire fields of snow. And birds did not follow people for hours without moving their wings. The creature had been waiting. Watching, Mercy had felt its attention long before it attacked. The mountains around her disappeared behind the thick snowfall. She could no longer tell if she was running toward the ridge or deeper into the valley. Her sense of direction had been lost. The compass in her pocket had stopped working when the storm began. Its needle spun uselessly, no matter how still she held it. She had thrown it away. Now she ran toward nothing. Her boots struck the frozen ground faster. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The rhythm became wild. Her lungs refused to keep up. The frozen air entered them in short, painful breaths, while the heat inside her body pushed outward as though her skin were a shell about to crack. She wanted to remove her coat. She wanted to lie down. She wanted to close her eyes and let the cold take away the pain. But the creature was behind her. That knowledge created a new kind of strength. Mercy reached the bottom of a steep slope. The ridge might have been above it. She began climbing. Her boots sank deep into the snow, forcing her to pull each leg free before taking the next step. She used her hands when the ground became too steep. Blood from her injured palm marked the snow. Red handprints appeared behind her, creating a trail that led directly to her body. She knew the creature did not need the trail. It already knew where she was. The storm suddenly became quiet. The wind did not slowly fade. It stopped. The snow still fell, but every flake seemed suspended in the air. Mercy froze. Her footsteps had been the only sound in the valley, and now even those were gone. She listened. There was nothing. No wind, no branches moving, no distant echo. Her own heartbeat sounded too loud. For one strange moment, Mercy thought she heard music. A low sound moved through the mountains, almost like trumpets calling from far away. It came from somewhere beyond the ridge. Hope entered her chest. Someone was there. The ranger station. Perhaps they had heard the storm and were sending a signal. Mercy opened her mouth to call out. Before she could make a sound, the rhythm of her heartbeat stopped. Something struck her back. The force drove her face first into the snow. A crushing weight pressed down on her shoulders. Mercy screamed, but the snow filled her mouth. Then the talons came through her coat. They tore through the outer layer, the thick sweater beneath it, and the shirt beneath that. The claws entered her flesh. Mercy's scream became a choking cry. The creature's grip tightened. Its talons closed around her so firmly that blood could no longer move properly through her arms. Her hands began to tingle, then quickly became numb. Warm liquid spread beneath her clothing. The shadow of the creature covered the snow around her. It stretched outward in every direction, wide and dark, almost like the embrace of a mother reaching for a frightened child. But there was no comfort in it. Mercy tried to dig her fingers into the snow. She searched for anything she could hold. A rock, A root, a branch. There was nothing. The creature lifted her. The ground disappeared beneath her body. For 1 second, she hung only a few feet above the slope. Then, enormous wings opened. The sudden movement created a blast of air that threw snow outward in a perfect circle. Mercy saw the creature's shadow expand over the entire mountainside. The wings moved once. The world dropped away. She rose into the sky so quickly that her stomach seemed to remain behind. Mercy screamed. The sound was torn from her mouth by the wind. The creature climbed through the storm, carrying her toward the clouds. Its talons remained buried in her back and shoulders. Every movement widened the wounds. Mercy looked down. The mountain became smaller. The slope where she had fallen disappeared beneath the snow. The trees became black lines. The valley became a pale wound between the mountains. She kicked and twisted, but her legs moved uselessly through the air. "Let me go," she screamed. The creature did not react. Its body remained above her, mostly hidden by darkness and wings. She could see only pieces of it, long black feathers, gray skin beneath them, claws shaped like curved knives, and something hanging from its chest that looked almost like a human face. Mercy stared at it. The face's eyes were closed. Its mouth moved. No sound came out. The creature climbed higher. They passed through the clouds. The storm disappeared beneath them. For a moment, Mercy saw the sky. It was not the sky she knew. There were no stars, no moon, only a deep black space that seemed to continue forever. The air became thinner. Her chest fought for breath. She screamed one final time, but no sound came. Darkness rushed into her vision from the edges. The blackness closed over the mountains, the creature, and the last remaining light. Then there was nothing. Mercy did not know how long she remained in the dark. Time had no meaning there. She could not feel her body. She could not feel the creature's talons. She could not hear the wings. At first, she believed she was dead. Then she heard someone calling her name. Mercy, the voice was gentle. Warm, familiar, the darkness shifted. A small light appeared far away. "Mercy, come closer." She moved toward it without knowing how. The light grew. It took the shape of a flame, small and golden, floating in the blackness. Behind it stood a figure. Mercy could not see the figure clearly. It appeared to be a man, though its body seemed to change whenever she looked directly at it. Sometimes it was tall. Sometimes it was bent with age. Sometimes it looked thin and weak. Sometimes it appeared strong enough to carry the mountains. The figure extended one hand. "Do not be afraid," it said. The nightmare began to leave her. The pain faded. The memory of the creature became distant. The screaming wind, the torn flesh, and the talons all seemed less real. Mercy moved closer. Light spread across the figure's face. For one moment, she believed she recognized him. Her father. The thought came with such force that she almost cried out. He had died when she was 9 years old. She remembered very little about him clearly. Most of her memories came from photographs, stories, and dreams. But the figure had his eyes, his smile, the small scar beside his mouth. "Dad?" Mercy whispered. The figure's smile widened. Yes, Mercy felt something inside her break. Years of grief rose at once. She moved toward him. He opened both arms. In his hands were pieces of something shattered. Mercy recognized them slowly. Promises, not physical objects, but memories given shape. She saw herself standing beside her father's hospital bed, promising she would be brave. She saw her mother promising that their family would survive. She saw doctors promising to do everything they could. She saw friends promising they would never leave. She saw herself promising she would not climb the mountain alone. Every broken promise rested in the figure's scarred hands. Blood ran from his palms. It dripped over the broken pieces, glowing dark red in the golden light. As the blood touched them, the pieces began to join. Cracks closed. Edges softened. The memories became whole. Mercy reached toward them. "Can you fix everything?" she asked. The figure nodded. "I can make it as it should have been." The flame beside him grew larger. Another appeared. Then another. Soon, a circle of fire surrounded Mercy and the figure. The flames did not frighten her. They gave warmth without pain. They reminded her of home, of winter evenings beside the fireplace, of her mother wrapping a blanket around her shoulders, of her father laughing in the kitchen. The figure held the repaired promises against his chest. "Come closer," he said. Mercy stepped into the circle. Her wounds disappeared. Her frozen body became warm. The exhaustion left her. She looked down and saw herself as a child again. Small hands, clean clothes, no blood, no fear. The figure knelt before her. His face was fully her father's now. Tears filled Mercy's eyes. "I missed you," she whispered. He reached toward her. "I missed you too." She wanted to believe him. Every part of her wanted to enter his arms. Behind him, the flames opened like a doorway. Golden light shone beyond them. Mercy could hear voices. Her father's voice. Her mother's voice. Friends she had lost. People she had disappointed. They were all waiting. The figure spoke 3 familiar words. "I love you." Mercy closed her eyes. For a single moment, she felt safe. Then water dripped onto her face. She opened her eyes. The figure was still smiling. Another drop fell, then another. Mercy looked at his hands. Water poured through the wounds in his palms. It did not flow over them. It came from inside them, clear at first, then gray, then black. The water fell onto the flames. The fire hissed. The golden doorway began to disappear. "No," Mercy whispered. The figure's smile remained fixed. More water poured from his hands. The flames shrank. The warmth left the air. The repaired promises cracked again. One by one, they fell apart. Mercy stepped backward. "What are you doing?" The figure did not answer. The water increased, flowing from his hands like 2 endless rivers. The flames became embers. The embers lifted into the air. As they rose, they changed into snowflakes. Cold wind entered the darkness. Mercy looked around. The golden world dissolved. The figure's face changed. Her father's features softened, stretched, and slipped away. Beneath them was a pale face without eyes. The mouth remained. It smiled. The 3 words echoed again. "I love you." But the voice no longer sounded gentle. It sounded copied. Practiced false, Mercy stumbled backward. The last flame went out. Reality returned. The creature's talons were still buried in her body. She was still high above the mountains. Only seconds had passed. Snow rushed around her. The wings beat above. Mercy screamed. The creature released her. She fell. The sky spun around her. Clouds swallowed her body, covering her in wet, cold darkness. Then she broke through the bottom of the storm. The mountains appeared below. They rushed upward. Mercy fell past sharp cliffs and frozen trees. She could not control her body. Her arms and legs turned uselessly in the air. Tears streamed from her eyes, but the wind pulled them away. They formed a thin river behind her, disappearing into the endless storm. Above, the creature circled. It was waiting. It had not released her out of mercy. It was playing. Mercy understood that the golden figure had never been a savior. It was another part of the beast, a dream placed inside her mind while it carried her through the sky. It had taken the face of the person she trusted most. It had used love as bait. Now the creature watched her fall, hungry, patient. Mercy looked toward the mountains. The world was strangely beautiful. Snow covered every peak. The night sky had become pale beneath the storm. For a moment, everything was silent again. Mother Nature's quiet night spread around her. Mercy thought of the ranger station. She thought of warmth. She thought of all the promises she had made and broken. She thought of her mother, who had begged her not to make the journey alone. Mercy closed her eyes. The ground came closer. Before she could strike it, the creature moved. Its wings folded. It dived. The shadow rushed over her. Talons opened. Instinct had defeated the creature's patience. Its hunger could no longer wait. The claws closed around Mercy again, only a few feet above the snow. This time, they pierced deeper. Mercy's body jerked. The creature lifted sharply, stealing her from death at the last possible moment. For 1 second, relief entered her. Then she saw where it was carrying her. A cliff opened ahead. In the frozen rock was a narrow black entrance. Bones surrounded it. Some were animal bones. Others were human. The creature carried Mercy toward the cave. She tried to scream, but no sound came. Inside the entrance, dozens of pale faces looked out from the darkness. All of them were smiling. All of them wore the faces of people she had loved. Her father stood among them. Water still flowed from the wounds in his hands. "I love you," he said again. The creature entered the cave. Darkness closed behind them. Outside, the storm continued. Snow covered Mercy's footprints. It filled the marks left by her hands. It buried the drops of blood that had steamed against the frozen ground. Within minutes, there was no sign that she had ever crossed the mountain. The wind softened. The falling snow became gentle again. The world returned to its peaceful white silence. And somewhere high inside the mountain, hidden beyond the reach of light, a new voice joined the others. It learned how Mercy spoke. It learned how she cried. It learned the names of the people she loved. Then it waited for the next traveler to cross the snow alone. Story 2. The rain did not wash away the blood. It only spread it across the pavement, thinning the dark red stain into long, uneven streams that ran toward the gutter. Under the weak streetlights, the blood looked almost unreal, like red paint dragged across wet paper. Mason sat behind the wheel of his car and watched the rain destroy what little evidence remained. The alley was narrow and empty, trapped between two abandoned brick buildings near the edge of the city. Broken windows stared down at him from above. Water dripped from rusted fire escapes and struck the roof of his car in a steady rhythm. The dashboard gave off the only light inside the vehicle. Its pale blue glow revealed Mason's tired face, the dark circles under his eyes, and the rough beard he had stopped bothering to shave. He had been sitting there for almost an hour. The body had already been taken away. The police tape still moved in the wind behind him, but the crime scene officers were gone. They had searched the alley, photographed the blood, collected what they could, and left Mason alone with another failure. Another dead person. Another message. Another piece in a game he had never agreed to play. Mason leaned forward and rested his forehead against the steering wheel. 10 years. For 10 years, he had followed bodies, clues, recordings, photographs, and carefully prepared crime scenes. For 10 years, he had chased a killer who always seemed to know what Mason would do before Mason knew it himself. The department called the killer the orchestrator. The name had first appeared in a newspaper article after the third murder. The reporter had written that the crimes seemed arranged rather than committed. Every victim had been placed with care. Every object had meaning. Every detail connected to something else. The orchestrator did not simply kill people. He designed their deaths. He turned murder into a performance and grief into part of the stage. Mason had been the killer's favorite audience member from the beginning. His phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Mason did not move immediately. There was no music or normal ringtone, only a low vibration against the leather seat. 3 short pulses, followed by one long one. The same pattern, the same rhythm. It had haunted him for years. He did not need to look at the screen to know who was calling. Still, he picked up the phone. No caller ID. Mason answered, but did not speak. For several seconds, there was only static and the sound of rain striking the car. Then a voice whispered into his ear. "Hello, detective." The voice was calm and smooth. It sounded friendly at first, almost gentle, but there was something sharp beneath it. Silk wrapped around a razor blade. Mason sat up slowly. "Where are you?" His voice sounded broken, as if every word had been dragged across gravel before leaving his throat. The orchestrator gave a soft laugh. "I'm in the memory of your mother's kitchen." Mason's fingers tightened around the phone. "I'm in the smell of the coffee she was making that morning," the voice continued. "I'm in the open window above the sink. I'm in the sound of her humming before she noticed the back door. Stop. I'm in the smell of the gunpowder that took your partner. Miller. I'm in the silence after the shot. I'm in the second before you turned around and understood that you were too late. Where are you?" Mason repeated. "I'm everywhere you have failed." Mason closed his eyes. The orchestrator had always understood how to hurt him, not only physically, but with memories. He knew which details to mention, which moments to bring back, which wounds had never truly closed. "You enjoy pretending that you are hunting me," the orchestrator said. "But we both know the truth. I am the director. Mason, you are only the lead actor who can never find his mark." Mason looked through the windshield at the blood washing into the drain. "You killed another innocent person. No one is innocent. Some are simply better at hiding what they are. You expect me to believe that? I don't care what you believe. Belief has never changed your role." Mason gripped the steering wheel with his free hand. His knuckles turned white. Every lead he had followed over the years had felt too perfect. A fingerprint left where it could be found. A witness who remembered one important detail. A security camera that captured only the right vehicle at exactly the right time. Each discovery pulled Mason forward. Each clue gave him hope. Then, at the end, he found another body. The orchestrator never made mistakes. He created the appearance of mistakes to guide Mason. Every lucky break had been handed to him on a silver platter wrapped in barbed wire. "I found the warehouse," Mason said. The orchestrator laughed again. "Of course you did." The answer sent cold anger through Mason's chest. "I left the door unlocked. The killer continued. I even made sure the address was written clearly enough for you to understand. I know how difficult these things can become when you haven't slept. If you touch anyone else, the final act has already started, Mason. The voice became quieter, and you are late for your cue. The call ended. Mason stared at the phone for half a second before throwing it onto the passenger seat. He started the engine. The tires spun against the wet pavement as he pulled out of the alley. He drove through the city faster than he should have, ignoring red lights and forcing other cars out of his way. The warehouse was an abandoned canning factory near the northern edge of town. It had closed 20 years earlier after a fire damaged part of the building. Since then, the property had changed owners several times, but nobody had repaired it. Mason had found the address hidden inside the latest crime scene. The dead man in the alley had been holding an old brass key. A number was carved into it. When Mason searched the number, it matched a storage locker registered under the name of his dead partner. Inside the locker, Mason found one object, a film script. Most of the pages were blank. Only the final page contained writing. The detective enters the factory. Below those words was the warehouse address. The orchestrator had known Mason would find it. He had known Mason would come alone. Mason parked outside the abandoned factory and stepped into the rain. The building rose from the darkness like the remains of some dead animal. Several windows were shattered. Metal pipes stretched along the roof, and a tall chimney disappeared into the storm clouds. The front gate hung open. So did the main door. Mason removed his gun from its holster and held it close to his chest. He wanted to call for backup, but the orchestrator had made it clear that time mattered. More than that, Mason knew what would happen if other officers arrived. The killer would disappear, or someone would die. That was how the game always worked. Mason entered. The door groaned behind him. The smell hit him immediately. Ozone and copper. The sharp scent of electricity mixed with the smell of fresh blood. He raised his gun and moved deeper into the building. Old machinery filled the factory floor. Large metal tanks stood in rows, covered in rust. Broken conveyor belts crossed the room like the bones of giant snakes. Rainwater leaked through holes in the roof and fell into puddles below. Mason listened. At first, he heard only the storm. Then came another sound, ticking, a clock. The sound was faint but clear, coming from somewhere beyond the machinery. Mason followed it. His shoes splashed through water. Each step echoed across the building. Shadows moved whenever lightning flashed through the broken windows. The ticking grew louder. Mason passed through a narrow space between two rusted machines and entered a large central room. A single spotlight shone from above. It illuminated a chair in the middle of the floor. Someone was tied to it. Mason stopped breathing. For 1 second, his mind refused to understand what his eyes were seeing. Then the person lifted her head. Linda, his younger sister, looked toward him. Her wrists were tied to the arms of the chair. Thick rope circled her chest and ankles. Silver tape covered her mouth. Blood ran from a cut above her eyebrow. Her eyes widened when she saw him. Linda was the last family Mason had. Their father had died when they were young. Their mother had been murdered during the first year of the orchestrator investigation. Mason had lost friends, co-workers, witnesses, and his partner. Linda was the only person the killer had not touched. Until now. Linda Mason ran forward. He took only 3 steps before his shoulder struck something hard. The impact knocked him backward. He fell to one knee, confused, then reached out. His hand touched glass. A transparent wall stood between him and Linda. The darkness and the reflection of the spotlight had made it almost invisible. Mason looked around. He was not standing inside the main room. He was inside a viewing gallery. He was the audience. No, he whispered. He fired at the glass. The gunshot exploded through the factory, but the bullet did not break the barrier. It flattened against the reinforced surface and fell to the floor. Linda screamed behind the tape. "Linda, listen to me," Mason shouted. "I'm getting you out." She shook her head violently. Something moved behind her. A figure stepped from the shadows. He wore a perfectly clean black suit, untouched by the dirt and water around him. Black gloves covered his hands. His face was hidden behind a smooth mask that seemed to change whenever Mason looked at it. Sometimes it appeared white, sometimes gray. Sometimes Mason thought he saw features moving beneath its surface. The orchestrator placed one hand on the back of Linda's chair. Mason raised his weapon again. "Step away from her." The figure tilted his head. Mason fired. Another bullet struck the glass. The orchestrator did not move. He leaned down and whispered something into Linda's ear. Whatever he said caused her eyes to fill with terror. She looked directly at Mason through the barrier. "No." Mason screamed. "Don't listen to him." A speaker above Mason crackled. "You did very well, Detective." The orchestrator's voice filled the room. "You followed every breadcrumb. You opened every door. You solved every little puzzle. Let her go. You played your part perfectly. Take me instead." The masked figure slowly straightened. "You still don't understand. You thought you were hunting me, but you were only walking toward your seat." Mason slammed the handle of his gun against the glass. "You want me? Here I am. I have always had you." Mason struck the barrier again. "You took my mother. Yes, you killed Miller. He was an important character. You destroyed everyone around me. Every story requires loss." Mason's face twisted with rage. "This isn't a story." The orchestrator turned slightly toward Linda. "It has always been a story." Mason continued hitting the glass. The gun slipped from his hand and fell to the floor, but he did not stop. He used his fists. The reinforced barrier did not move. His skin split across his knuckles. Blood appeared on the glass. Behind it, Linda struggled against the ropes. The orchestrator stepped behind her chair. Mason saw something shine in his gloved hand. No, the ticking stopped. The sudden silence was worse than any sound. No. Mason screamed. What happened next was fast, but Mason experienced every second as if time had slowed. The orchestrator moved with calm, practiced control. Linda's body jerked against the ropes. Her eyes remained fixed on Mason. He pounded against the glass until both hands were covered in blood. He screamed her name. She tried to speak through the tape. Then the life disappeared from her face. Her body became still. The orchestrator stepped away. Mason remained pressed against the glass, unable to move. The silence that followed was heavier than his screams. Something inside Mason broke, but the pain was too large to understand all at once. It was not a sharp feeling. It was an emptiness spreading through his chest, removing everything it touched. The glass wall slid open with a quiet hiss. Mason stumbled forward. He fell beside Linda's chair and tore the tape from her mouth. He pressed his fingers against her neck, searching for a pulse he already knew he would not find. Linda, her head rested against his shoulder. "I'm sorry." His voice cracked. "I'm so sorry." He worked at the ropes with shaking hands. When they finally came free, he lowered her body to the floor and held her against him. Memories came without warning. Linda, at 7 years old, following him around the house. Linda sitting beside their mother in the kitchen. Linda calling him after Miller's funeral. Linda telling him to leave the case before it destroyed him. She had spent 10 years begging Mason to stop chasing the orchestrator. Now the chase had taken her too. Mason looked up. The masked figure stood near the edge of the spotlight. Why? The word barely escaped his throat. The orchestrator did not answer. Mason lowered Linda gently to the floor and rose unsteadily. "Why did you do this?" The speaker crackled. The killer's voice sounded almost bored. "Which part?" "My mother." Mason took a step forward. "My partner." Another step. "My sister." His hands hung at his sides, covered in blood. "Why them?" The orchestrator tilted his head. "Because it amused me." Mason stared at him. "It amused me to watch a man of your supposed intelligence behave exactly as expected. You ruined my life for entertainment. I gave your life direction." Mason's body trembled. "You were never a detective, Mason. You were a protagonist in a story written long before you understood that you were inside it." The orchestrator moved backward toward the shadows. "Every decision you made belonged to me. Every clue, every sacrifice, every angry promise. I knew where you would stand before you entered the room." Mason searched the floor for his gun, but it remained inside the gallery. "You think you controlled me?" "I know I did." "I'll kill you." "You have said that before. This time is different." "No. This is exactly how this scene was written." The lights around the room began switching off, one after another. The darkness moved closer. Mason rushed toward the orchestrator. The masked figure gave a soft laugh and stepped beyond the edge of the spotlight. Mason followed, but there was no one there. He reached an empty section of floor surrounded by rusted machinery. He heard footsteps to his left and ran toward them. Nothing. A door slammed somewhere above him. Then another laugh came from behind. Mason turned. The factory was empty. Only the faint smell of ozone remained. The orchestrator had disappeared into the building as if the darkness itself had swallowed him. Police arrived 20 minutes later. Mason did not remember calling them. He remembered kneeling beside Linda while distant sirens grew louder. He remembered officers entering with weapons raised. He remembered someone pulling him away from her body. The investigators searched the factory for hours. They found hidden speakers, lights, cameras, and mechanical controls. They found the viewing gallery and the reinforced glass. They did not find the orchestrator. There were no useful fingerprints, no clear footprints, no vehicle tracks that did not belong to Mason or the police. The cameras had already erased themselves. The mask was gone. So was the black suit. The only item left behind was a printed page resting on Linda's chair. The final line read, "Thank you for playing your part, Mason. The department placed Mason on leave. His captain told him he needed rest. A police psychologist told him that grief could produce dangerous thoughts and obsessive behavior." Mason listened without reacting. They did not understand. They believed the case had ended because the orchestrator had completed some final performance. They believed Linda had been the last victim in a personal campaign against Mason. But Mason knew better. The orchestrator did not end things. He created pauses. Weeks passed. Then months. The city returned to normal, because cities always do. People continued going to work. Restaurants stayed open. Children walked to school. The news found new tragedies to report. Linda's death became another old headline. Mason remained alone in his apartment. He covered the walls with photographs, maps, newspaper articles, phone records, and copies of every clue the orchestrator had ever left behind. He started again from the first murder. He studied every word, every location, every victim. He stopped looking at the crimes as separate events. Instead, he treated them as scenes in one long production. Slowly, patterns appeared. The orchestrator had been right about one thing. The story had been planned. But every story revealed something about its writer. The locations formed a shape across the city. The times of the murders matched dates from old theater programs. The victims' names connected to characters in forgotten plays. Even the way the bodies had been positioned followed a repeated structure. The orchestrator believed Mason had only followed clues. He did not realize Mason had been learning. Now Mason moves through the city alone. He walks through rain and shadows, following traces no one else can see. He visits abandoned theaters, closed factories, and buildings connected to forgotten crimes. He no longer wears his badge. He no longer waits for permission. Every ringing phone reminds him of the voice that stole everything from him. Sometimes he answers and hears only silence. Sometimes there is music playing quietly in the background. Once he heard applause. The orchestrator believes the performance has reached its curtain call. He believes Mason is a broken man wandering through the final pages of a completed story. He is wrong. Mason is still searching. He searches because Linda deserves more than grief. Because Miller deserves more than a name on a memorial wall. Because his mother's kitchen still exists in his memory, bright and warm before the blood. One day, Mason will find the man behind the mask. Maybe that day is already written. Maybe the orchestrator is still directing every step. But stories can change when their characters stop following the script. And Mason has finally learned how to improvise. Story 3. It started with a blue dot. At exactly 3:14 in the morning, I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating against the wooden nightstand beside my bed. The noise was low, but harsh in the silence of the room, a rough buzzing that seemed much louder than it should have been. I opened my eyes, but did not move at first. The room was dark, except for the weak light from the street lamp outside my window. I was exhausted, confused, and still trapped somewhere between sleep and waking. For a few seconds, I considered ignoring the phone completely. Then it vibrated again. I reached over and nearly knocked over the glass of water beside it and picked it up. The notification on the screen said that my brother Leo's location had been updated. I frowned at it. Leo and I had shared our locations for years. It had started as something practical. Our mother worried about us, especially when we drove long distances, and after a while it simply became normal. I rarely checked where he was unless we were meeting somewhere or one of us was late. I had no idea why the app had sent me a notification in the middle of the night. Still half asleep, I opened Find My Friends. I expected Leo's blue dot to be sitting at his house on the north side of town. Maybe he had gone to bed late and his phone had briefly lost connection. Maybe the app had refreshed for no reason. But his dot was not at home. It was moving slowly through the industrial district on the south side of town. I sat up in bed. The industrial area was mostly made up of old warehouses, repair shops, storage yards, and loading buildings. During the day, delivery trucks moved in and out constantly. But at night, the whole district became empty and lifeless. Most of the businesses had metal shutters over their windows. Several buildings had been abandoned for years. The streetlights were spread too far apart, leaving long sections of road completely dark. It was not the kind of place anyone visited at 3 in the morning without a reason. I watched the dot move along one road, turn onto another, and then slow down near an old service station. A few seconds later, it stopped. The name of the location appeared on the map. Suds and Shine Auto. It was a 24-hour car wash that had not truly operated in years. The machine still worked sometimes, and the sign still came on at night, but there was almost never anyone there. Half the wash bays had been blocked with traffic cones, and the office windows were covered with dusty boards. I stared at the screen. Who drives to an almost abandoned car wash at 3 in the morning? The thought repeated in my mind. I knew there could have been an innocent explanation. Maybe Leo could not sleep. Maybe he had spilled something in his truck. Maybe he was meeting someone who worked nearby. But there was another reason his location frightened me. 3 girls had gone missing from our town during the previous 6 months. All 3 were around the same age. All 3 had disappeared while alone. None of them had been found. The police kept telling people there was no confirmed connection between the cases. They warned everyone not to spread rumors or create panic. They said investigators were considering every possibility. Nobody believed them. The girls had lived in different parts of town, but each had disappeared after dark. One vanished while walking home from work. Another was last seen leaving a friend's house. The third disappeared after her car broke down near the edge of town. People understood what the police refused to say. Someone was hunting young women. Leo seemed more disturbed by the disappearances than anyone I knew. He printed missing person flyers using his own money. He placed them in supermarkets, cafes, petrol stations, and bus stops. When the police organized public searches, Leo was always among the first people to arrive. He walked through woods with a flashlight. He searched drainage ditches, empty buildings, and fields. He brought coffee to volunteers and helped families speak to reporters. At the vigil for the second missing girl, I saw him cry. He stood beside her mother while she struggled to speak. When she finally broke down, Leo hugged her and promised they would not stop searching until her daughter came home. That was the kind of person I believed my brother was. Someone who showed up. Someone who cared when other people looked away. Someone families trusted when their lives were falling apart. If anyone had told me to be afraid of Leo, I would have laughed in their face. But looking back, there were things I ignored because I loved him. Small things, strange questions, moments that made me uncomfortable but never seemed serious enough to confront him about. Leo always wanted to know what the police had discovered. At first, that seemed natural. Everyone in town wanted updates, but Leo's interest felt different. He was less interested in whether the girls might still be alive and more interested in the methods being used to find them. He asked how long it usually took police to search nearby businesses. He wondered whether tracking dogs could follow a scent across standing water. He asked whether mobile phone locations could continue updating underground. Once, while we were having dinner, He asked how long fingerprints survived on wet concrete. I remember staring at him. He had laughed and said he had seen something about it in a documentary. His questions never sounded emotional. They sounded practical, careful, like he was testing possibilities. Whenever I looked uncomfortable, he would smile in an embarrassed way and blame it on stress. "I've been thinking about this too much," he would say. I believed him because I wanted to. There was something else, too. After the second girl disappeared, Leo began telling people that something was following him. He said he would see a figure behind him in reflective glass. He noticed it in shop windows late at night, standing just beyond the edge of the security lights. He described it as tall and dark, with no clear face. Sometimes he said the shape moved when he moved. Other times he claimed it stood completely still and watched him from across the street. He called it the shadow. At first, he made jokes about it. He said he was probably tired or becoming paranoid from spending so much time searching at night. Then he started sounding serious. He told me the shadow was not human. He said it sometimes appeared near places connected to the missing girls. He suggested that maybe whatever had taken them was now following him because he had come too close to the truth. Everyone reacted in the same way. They worried about Leo. They told him he needed rest. They praised him for continuing to help even though he felt threatened. The story made him seem brave. That night, as I watched his blue dot sitting at the old car wash, I tried to convince myself that I was being paranoid. Leo was my brother. There had to be a normal reason for him to be there. I almost closed the app and put the phone down. Then the dot moved again. It traveled deeper into the property, away from the main road and toward the rear wash bays. A moment later, another notification appeared. "Leo has arrived at Suds and Shine Auto." Something about the word arrived made my stomach tighten. Arrived meant he had a destination. It meant he had chosen that place. He had not stopped there because of an emergency. He had not pulled over by accident. He had gone there on purpose. I got out of bed before I had time to think properly. I pulled on jeans, a sweatshirt, and shoes. I grabbed my keys from the dresser and left the house without even turning on the lights. The streets were almost empty. As I drove, I kept my phone on the passenger seat with the map open. At every red light, I looked down at it. Leo's dot did not move. It remained perfectly still at the car wash. Waiting, that was how it felt. I tried calling him twice, but both calls went directly to voicemail. I told myself his battery might be low. I told myself he might be inside one of the concrete bays where the signal was weak. I told myself dozens of things. None of them made me feel better. The closer I got to the industrial district, the fewer streetlights there were. The road became rough, and empty buildings rose on both sides of me. Metal fences surrounded truck yards filled with silent trailers. Security lights cast pale circles across cracked concrete. In the distance, smoke rose from a factory chimney, though I could not hear any machinery. Suds and Shine Auto stood at the end of a narrow access road. It looked worse in person than it did in my memory. The large sign above the entrance still glowed, but several letters had burned out. Instead of reading Suds and Shine, it said Uds Shine. The missing letters made the name look like a warning written in a language I did not understand. The building had 4 open wash bays. 2 were blocked by cones. Another was completely dark. The last had a fluorescent light hanging from the ceiling. It flashed on and off in uneven bursts. Water dripped somewhere inside. Each drop struck metal and echoed through the empty property. Leo's truck was parked along the side of the building. The engine was off. No lights were on inside it. I parked several spaces away and remained in my car for almost a minute, gripping the steering wheel. The property appeared empty. The wet concrete inside the open bays reflected the flashing light like black glass. In the reflections, the building looked deeper and larger than it really was. For a second, I thought I saw someone standing in one of the bay windows. Then I realized it was my own reflection. The glass stretched my body and made me look thin and distant, like a person watching from underwater. I stepped out of the car. The air smelled of wet concrete, oil, and old soap. "Leo?" I called. My voice echoed. There was no answer. I walked toward his truck and looked through the driver's window. The keys were gone. His jacket was lying on the passenger seat. There was an empty coffee cup in the holder. I checked the rear of the truck. Nothing. Then I heard something scrape from inside the car wash. It sounded like a heavy object being dragged across concrete. I turned toward the building. A narrow side door near the last wash bay stood slightly open. Darkness filled the gap. I should have called the police then. I know that now. I should have gone back to my car, locked the doors, and waited for help. But I still believed there had to be an explanation. I still believed my brother might be in trouble. I pushed the door open. The air inside was colder. The room beyond had once been used for storing cleaning supplies and tools. Rusted shelves lined the walls. Plastic containers stood in dark corners, and a broken mop bucket had been overturned near the entrance. The smell hit me immediately. Bleach, rust, and something sweeter underneath. Something thick and spoiled. I knew what the smell reminded me of, but I refused to name it. My phone vibrated in my hand so hard that I nearly dropped it. A new notification appeared. Leo is now 10 feet away. I stopped breathing. I looked around the room. There was no one there. Then I looked at the map. The blue dot that represented Leo was no longer sitting inside the wash bay. It was moving toward my dot. Slowly, deliberately, at the same moment, I heard footsteps beyond the wall. One step, then another. Not normal footsteps. There was a dragging sound between them, as if one foot was being pulled across the floor. The blue dot moved closer. I called Leo's name. Once, quietly, no answer came. The footsteps stopped. For several seconds, the building was completely silent, except for the dripping water. Then, I heard the scrape again. I stepped backward and bumped into one of the shelves. Something rolled from the shelf and fell to the floor. I looked down. A length of rope lay beside a large floor drain. It had been coiled neatly, almost carefully. The ends were dark. The rope looked as though it had been soaked, dried, and used again many times. Beside it was a stack of folded papers. I picked up the top one. It was a missing person flyer. The face of the first girl stared up at me. Her photograph had been folded through the middle. Under it was a flyer for the second girl, then the third. They were not there because someone had been helping with the searches. They had been saved. Collected, my hands began shaking. Behind the flyers was a small plastic hair clip, shaped like a flower. I remembered seeing it in one of the missing photographs. The second girl had been wearing it. I backed toward the door. My phone buzzed again. Leo can see your location. I stared at the notification. I did not know he had that setting turned on. Maybe he always had. Maybe that had been the point from the beginning. I had believed I was tracking him, but he had been tracking me too. Suddenly, every strange detail rearranged itself in my mind. The search groups, the flyers, the vigils, the questions about police methods, the tears, the promises, the shadow. The shadow was not something following him. It was a story, a mask, something frightening and inhuman that he could blame if anyone became suspicious. If he acted nervous, it was because the shadow was watching him. If he appeared near a place connected to the missing girls, it was because he was investigating. If someone saw a dark figure near him, he could say it had been there before. He had created a monster, so nobody would notice the real one standing beside them. I turned toward the door. That was when Leo stepped into the room. He looked almost normal. That was the worst part. He was wearing jeans, work boots, and a dark jacket. His hair was slightly messy, and there was a small stain on one sleeve. He did not look angry. He did not look frightened. He looked calm. Calm in a way no innocent person could have been. The flashing light from the wash bay reflected across his face. Water on the floor broke his reflection into pieces. Behind him, the glass panels showed his shadow from several different angles. For a moment, it looked as though 3 or 4 versions of Leo were entering the room together. He saw me looking at him. Then he smiled. "I wondered how long it would take you," he said. His voice was casual. It sounded like the way he spoke when we met for lunch or when he arrived late to a family dinner. I could barely make my mouth work. "Where are they?" I asked. Leo tilted his head. His expression looked almost disappointed. "You always skip to the ugliest part. Where are the girls?" He glanced toward the floor drain. Then his eyes moved back to me. "You shouldn't have come alone. I wish I could say I ran immediately. People like to imagine that fear makes you fast. They think terror gives you strength and sharpens your mind. Sometimes it does, but not at first. At first, fear makes you stupid. It freezes your thoughts. It makes you search for one more explanation. It convinces you that if you ask the right question, everything will return to normal." I wanted Leo to deny it. I wanted him to laugh and tell me it was all a misunderstanding. I wanted him to be my brother again. "Why?" I asked. He looked down at his reflection in the wet floor. Then he gave a quiet laugh. "Because people trust the one who helps them look." I felt sick. "They tell him everything," he continued. "Where they were last seen, what roads they take, who they call when they're afraid." He took one step toward me. They open doors for him. Another step. They get into cars. My phone buzzed. Leo is now 5 feet away. I stared at the message. That detail has stayed with me more clearly than anything else. Not his smile, not the rope, not the smell. The blue dot. That small blue dot moving closer to mine while the app calmly measured the distance between us. It felt as though my phone was narrating my death. Leo's eyes dropped toward the screen. "You should put that away," he said. I finally moved. I backed through the side door, turned, and ran. Behind me, Leo followed. He did not sprint. He did not shout. He came after me at a steady pace, certain that I had nowhere to go. That frightened me more than if he had chased me wildly. I reached my car, pulled the door open, and climbed inside. My hand slipped twice before I managed to lock it. Leo stepped out beneath the broken sign. The dead letters glowed above him. Ud's shine. I started the engine and grabbed my phone. Leo stopped several yards from my car. I called 911. While I spoke to the operator, he watched me through the windscreen. He never tried to break the window. He never pulled the door handle. He did not run away. He simply stood under the flickering light with the same calm expression. It was as if he had been waiting for me to understand, as if this was not a failure, as if he had finally shown me something he had wanted me to see. The police arrived within minutes. Leo was still standing there when the first patrol car entered the property. He raised his hands without being told. He did not resist. He did not look at the officers. He kept looking at me. The police searched the building. They found enough evidence to connect him to all 3 missing girls. Some of it was hidden beneath the floor. Some had been sealed inside chemical drums. There were photographs, personal items, ropes, tools, and notes describing where each girl had been taken. They also found maps from the search parties. Leo had marked the places police had already checked. He had used the searches to learn which areas were safe. He had stood beside volunteers while they walked past places where evidence was hidden. The girls' families had thanked him. Some had hugged him. One mother had invited him into her home. What the police did not find was anything supernatural. There was no shadow, no creature, no curse, no dark presence following him through reflective glass. There was only Leo, a man who learned that people are easiest to hurt when they believe he is the one trying to save them. The investigation lasted for months. Leo eventually admitted parts of what he had done, though he never told the complete truth. He liked controlling the story too much. Sometimes he blamed anger. Sometimes he blamed loneliness. Once, during a recorded interview, he claimed the shadow had forced him. The detectives asked him to describe it. He gave them the same details he had told everyone else. Tall, dark, without a face, always watching from the edge of the light. But when they asked when he first saw it, his answer changed. When they asked whether it spoke to him, he smiled. The police believed the shadow had been invented long before the second girl disappeared. It gave him an excuse to talk about dark figures near crime scenes. It allowed him to create confusion if a witness ever saw him at night. It also made him look frightened. People rarely suspect the person who appears afraid of the same thing they fear. My family fell apart after his arrest. Our mother refused to believe it at first. She said the evidence had been planted. She accused the police of needing someone to blame. She believed Leo had been targeted because he knew too much about the investigation. Then the photographs were shown in court. After that, she stopped speaking about him. My father watched the entire trial without reacting. He sat in the same seat every day, staring straight ahead. I only attended when I was required to testify. I did not want to look at Leo. But when I entered the courtroom, he looked directly at me. He smiled in the same calm way he had at the car wash. During my testimony, the prosecutor asked why I had gone to Suds and Shine that night. I explained the location notification. I explained the blue dot. Leo's lawyer tried to suggest that I had already suspected my brother and had gone there looking for evidence. That was not true. I had gone there because I thought he needed help. That was still the hardest truth to admit. Even after all the strange questions and uncomfortable moments, my first instinct had been to protect him. Love had not made me blind. It had made me explain away what I could see. Leo was convicted. He will spend the rest of his life in prison. People sometimes tell me I should be grateful that the app warned me. They say my decision to follow his location helped solve the case. That is true. The app did nothing wrong. It showed me exactly where Leo was. It gave me the truth when my own mind kept trying to avoid it. Still, I keep location services turned off now. I know that sounds irrational. Leo cannot track me anymore. He is locked away, and the account he used has been disabled. But I cannot stand seeing the map. Sometimes, when I open an app by mistake and see the small location symbol at the top of the screen, my chest tightens. I remember standing inside that building with the smell of bleach and rust filling my lungs. I remember the rope beside the drain. I remember the flyers folded like souvenirs. Most of all, I remember the blue dot moving toward mine. Slow, patient, certain. For months after the trial, I woke at 3:14 every morning. I would reach for my phone before I was fully awake. Sometimes I imagined that there was another notification waiting for me. Leo's location has updated. In those moments, I knew it was impossible. Still, I pictured his dot moving away from the prison, crossing highways, passing through empty towns, coming closer to my house. I would watch it move room by room until it stopped outside my bedroom door. Then, another message would appear. Leo is now 10 feet away. I no longer sleep with my phone on the nightstand. I leave it in the kitchen. That has not stopped the dreams. In the worst one, I am back inside the car wash. Leo is standing in front of me, but his face is hidden in darkness. Behind him, his shadow stretches across every wall. When I look down at my phone, there are dozens of blue dots moving around the building. Each one has his name. They close in from every direction. I always wake before they reach me. People still talk about Leo as though he became a monster in secret. They ask when he changed. They ask whether there was a moment when the person I knew disappeared and something else took his place. I do not think it happened that way. There was no clear transformation. No single moment. The brother I loved and the man who killed those girls were not two separate people. He helped our mother carry groceries. He remembered birthdays. He sat beside me in hospital waiting rooms. He organized search parties. He comforted grieving families. And he killed people. All of those things were true at the same time. That is what frightens me now. Monsters do not always hide behind ugly faces. Sometimes they build their disguise from kindness. They learn how caring people speak. They learn when to cry and when to offer help. They memorize the shape of trust and wear it until no one can see what is underneath. Leo did not hide his cruelty behind darkness. He hid it behind love. That was the mask he built first. And sometimes, late at night, I still wonder whether he cared about me in his own broken way. I wonder whether he wanted me to find him. He could have turned off his location. He could have left his phone somewhere else. He knew I could see him. He knew the app might notify me. When he said he had wondered how long it would take me, it sounded as though he had been expecting me. Maybe he wanted an audience. Maybe he wanted to know whether I would still try to save him once I saw the truth. Or maybe he had planned for me to become another blue dot that stopped moving. I will never ask him. He has written to me several times from prison. I returned the first letters unopened. Then one arrived with no return name on the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. There were no apologies, no explanation. He had drawn a map. At the center was a small blue dot. Under it, he had written my name. A second dot appeared at the edge of the page. A dark line connected it to mine. Beneath the drawing was one sentence. You were always watching the wrong shadow. I burned the letter. Since then, I have moved twice. I changed my phone number. I deleted every location sharing app I had. I stopped posting photographs that could show where I lived. I understand that these precautions are probably unnecessary. Leo is not coming back. But sometimes, at 3:14 in the morning, my phone still vibrates from the kitchen. Usually it is an email or a harmless system update. I never check it until the sun comes up. Because for a few seconds after that vibration, I am standing inside Suds and Shine again. I can smell bleach. I can hear water dripping. I can see the blue dot moving closer. And I remember that the worst part was not discovering that my brother was a monster. The worst part was understanding how carefully he had built the mask. He had made it from tears, promises, search parties, and comforting words. He had made it from all the things that looked like love. And until the moment he stepped out of the darkness, it fit him perfectly. Story 4. Father Silas reached the farmhouse a little after midnight. Rain hammered against the roof so hard that it sounded like hundreds of fists beating on the old wood. Wind moved across the empty fields in long, angry waves, bending the dead trees and shaking the loose shutters on the house. Behind him, the narrow country road was already disappearing beneath thick mud and running water. The farmhouse stood alone at the edge of a wide cornfield. The crop had died months ago, but no one had cleared it away. Black stalks leaned against one another in the storm, scratching and knocking like dry bones. Beyond the field, hidden behind the darkness and rain, was the lake. Silas could not see it from the front porch. He could still feel it. The call had come almost an hour earlier. A woman had spoken through heavy sobs, barely able to form complete sentences. Her name was Miriam. Her 12-year-old son, Noah, had fallen through the ice on the lake 3 weeks ago. He had been beneath the water for 4 minutes. By the time the men pulled him out, he had no pulse. His skin had turned blue, and his body was stiff from the cold. The local doctor had worked on him for nearly half an hour before Noah suddenly coughed up water and began breathing again. Everyone called it a miracle. That was what people always called something they did not understand. Since waking up, Noah had not spoken a single normal word. During the day, he remained silent and stared at the walls. At night, he appeared at the foot of his parents' bed with water dripping from his clothes. His eyes had turned black and wet. Dead fish appeared in the bathtub every morning, even when the drain had been covered. Scratches had formed across the ceiling above his bed. The words were from Scripture, but they had been written backward, as if someone had carved them while looking up from inside the roof. Miriam had begged for an exorcism. Father Silas had told her he was already on his way. What he had not told her was that he had been waiting for a call like this for most of his life. Miriam opened the front door before he knocked. She looked as if she had not slept since the accident. Her hair was tied back badly, and her face was pale, except for the red skin around her eyes. She wore an old sweater that had been pulled over her nightdress. "Father," she whispered. Silas stepped inside without answering. The warmth of the house did little to remove the cold that had followed him in from the storm. A man stood near the stairs. Noah's father, Silas guessed. He was large, with rough hands and a face shaped by years of outdoor work, but he looked helpless now. He held a hunting rifle against his chest, though the safety was still on. "You won't need that," Silas said. The man glanced down at the weapon. "You haven't seen him. I have seen worse." The father looked toward the ceiling. Something moved above them. A slow, dragging sound passed from one side of the upper floor to the other. Miriam flinched. "He knows you're here," she said. Silas removed his wet coat and placed it over the back of a chair. Underneath, he wore the black clothes and white collar of a priest. Around his neck hung a small iron cross that had become dark with age. "Where is he?" "His room, at the end of the upstairs hall. Has anyone entered since you called me?" "No." "Has he spoken?" "Not to us." Silas looked at her. "What does that mean?" Miriam wrapped her arms around herself. "Sometimes we hear him talking through the walls." "To whom?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Children," the dragging sound stopped. For several seconds, the entire house became still. Then a child laughed somewhere upstairs. The sound was soft and distant, as if it had come through deep water. Noah's father raised the rifle. Silas placed one hand over the barrel and pushed it down. "Stay here," he said. Miriam reached for his sleeve. "Please bring him back." Silas looked at her hand, then at her face. He had heard those words many times before. Parents always wanted the same thing. They did not care what came back, as long as it wore the right face and answered to the right name. "I will do what I can," he said. It was the kind of answer people heard as a promise. Silas climbed the stairs. Each step groaned beneath his weight. The hallway on the second floor smelled of mildew, incense, and cold lake water. The wallpaper was stained with damp marks, even though the roof had never leaked. Family photographs covered both walls, but every frame had been turned face down. Silas passed them without touching them. At the end of the hallway, Noah's bedroom door stood open. Weak yellow light spilled across the floor. The boy sat cross-legged in the center of the room. He wore a dark suit that was several sizes too large for him. Mud covered the cuffs of the trousers, and the shirt beneath the jacket was stained brown with lake water. A dead white funeral flower still clung to one shoulder. Silas stopped in the doorway. Miriam had not mentioned the suit. He knew what it was. It was the clothing Noah's parents had chosen when they believed he was dead. They must have dressed him for burial before his body suddenly returned to life, or before something returned inside it. The bedroom was small. A wooden bed stood against one wall. A shelf held school books, toy cars, and a baseball glove. The room should have belonged to an ordinary child. Instead, water covered the floor in a thin black layer. Small fish lay dead near the walls. Noah slowly raised his head. His skin was pale and swollen. His lips were blue. Wet hair clung to his forehead, though the rest of his clothes looked almost dry. His eyes were not reflecting water. They were full of it. Tiny ripples moved across both pupils. Something pale and thin passed behind one of them, like a small creature swimming beneath the surface. Silas stepped into the room. "Good evening, Noah," the boy smiled. His mouth opened. Black lake water poured over his lower lip and ran down his chin. Weeds came with it, sliding across his shirt. A tiny silver fish dropped from his mouth and struck the floor. It slapped its tail once. Then it stopped moving. Miriam made a choking sound from the hallway behind Silas. He did not turn around. "Leave us," he said. She did not move. "Noah," she whispered. The boy's head turned toward her. When he spoke, the voice did not come only from his mouth. It came from the walls, the bed frame, the floor, and somewhere inside Silas's own ribs. Ask him what is under the church. Miriam froze. Silas stepped backward and shut the bedroom door in her face. He heard her hand touch the wood from the other side. Father, go downstairs. What did he mean? Go downstairs now. He waited until her footsteps moved away. Then he locked the door. Noah watched him with a pleased expression. You are afraid she will remember, the voices said. Silas carried a black leather case to the center of the room and knelt beside it. I am not here to speak with you. You have spoken with us before. Silas opened the case. Inside was a bottle of holy water, a silver crucifix burned almost completely black, 4 iron nails engraved with lines of scripture, and a small glass jar sealed with red wax. Something floated inside, yellow oil. It was a human tongue. The flesh had dried and shrunk until it looked more like a dead root than part of a person. Thin black thread had been pushed through it in several places. Noah's smile disappeared. The water in his eyes became still. That does not belong to you, the voices whispered. Silas picked up the first iron nail. Very little belongs to the people who hold it. He moved to one corner of the room, pressed the nail against the floorboard, and struck it with a small hammer. The sound echoed through the walls. Noah's body jerked. Silas drove the other 3 nails into the remaining corners. Each one caused another reaction. The boy's shoulder twisted. His fingers bent backward. His jaw moved from side to side as though something inside him were testing the bones. When all 4 nails were in place, Silas placed the blackened crucifix beside the bed. Then he set the glass jar in the center of the floor between himself and Noah. Every movement he made was slow, calm, and careful. That was why people trusted men like him. A priest could arrange the tools of a sacrifice in front of a child, and if he moved gently enough, everyone would believe he was there to help. Noah's wet eyes remained fixed on the jar. You know my name, he said. There was fear beneath the many voices now. Silas looked at him. I know what came back wearing it. That was not completely true. He knew enough. 30 years earlier, before taking his final vows, Silas had traveled to the lake with 2 older priests. At the time, he had been young, ambitious, and desperate to prove his faith. The church had hidden the truth about the lake for generations. Long before the farmhouse, the town, or the road existed, there had been a chapel on the shore. It was built from black stone by people whose names had been removed from every record. The chapel did not belong to God. Something had been chained beneath it. No one knew whether it was a demon, an ancient spirit, or something that had lived in the earth before human beings learned to pray. The first priests who discovered it had tried to destroy it. They failed. So they built a church over it and called the prison holy. Years later, the ground broke apart and the lake swallowed the chapel. Its tower vanished beneath the water, followed by the roof and the stone crosses. The thing remained below. On winter nights, grief traveled through the ice and woke it. Parents who lost children near the lake began dreaming of voices beneath the water. They left toys, food, hair, teeth, and blood along the shore without anyone telling them to do so. Sometimes the lake returned what it had taken. But it never returned anything alone. Something always came back inside the body. The church's answer had always been simple. Contain it. Feed it when necessary. Hide the truth. Call the result mercy. Silas had followed those instructions. Then he had discovered that the creature could offer more than false miracles. It could hold voices. It could return secrets. It could punish. It could be used. The two priests who had taken him beneath the frozen lake that night never came back up. Silas did. Afterward, he told the church that the ice had broken and the others had drowned. No one questioned him, not after he produced the relic he had found below, the tongue in the jar. Noah leaned away from it. "You brought me here to bury yourself," the voices said. Silas broke the wax seal. No. He removed the lid. The smell that rose from the jar was sweet, rotten, and warm. "I brought you here so it would take the right person this time." The walls gave a low groan. Something large moved behind them with a slow, wet drag. Silas tipped the jar. The shriveled tongue dropped into his palm. Noah's entire body pulled backward. Though he did not use his hands or feet, it looked as though an invisible rope had tightened around his chest. The bed frame shook. Water began leaking from the cracks in the ceiling. Silas placed the tongue beside the black crucifix and began the rite. Latin filled the room in a low, steady voice. The words were old, but not as old as the thing beneath the lake. They had been changed over the centuries, mixed with prayers from dead languages and commands taken from people the church had once called heretics. Silas drew a circle around Noah using holy water. Where the drops touched the floor, the black water hissed. Noah's body began to shake. At first, the movement was small. Then his arms snapped outward, his back bent. His teeth struck together so hard that one cracked. A dark line appeared beneath his throat. It slowly traveled down the center of his chest. The mark looked like a cut, but no blade touched him. Blood did not come from it. Black water did. The line reached his sternum. Noah's ribs moved beneath his skin. They spread apart just enough for something to push through from inside. A face appeared in his chest. It belonged to a woman. Her skin was pale, swollen, and damaged by water. Strands of hair floated around her face as though she were still beneath the lake. Black water poured from her open eyes. Silas recognized her immediately. Her name had been Elise. Years earlier, her son had vanished beneath the lake during winter. For 7 days, she had come to the church and begged Silas to help. She asked him to bless the lake again. She asked him to organize another search. She begged him to tell her that God had not abandoned her child. Silas had told her what the church wanted her to hear. Her son was with God. The lake had already been searched. Dragging the bottom would only disturb the dead. She needed to accept God's will. On the 7th evening, Elise walked into the lake at sunset. Witnesses said she kept walking even after the water rose above her head. Her body had never been found. Now her dead mouth moved inside Noah's chest. "You told me he was with God." Silas continued praying. "You told me not to drag the lake." His voice never broke. "You knew he was under the chapel." Silas lifted the crucifix. More faces appeared behind hers. Children pressed through the darkness between Noah's ribs. Some were very young. Others looked close to Noah's age. Their skin was white and swollen. Weeds hung from their mouths. Mud filled their empty eye sockets. They were not separate spirits. They were parts of the same thing. That was its true form. Not one demon, but a gathering of the drowned. A congregation built from grief, fear, and bodies lost beneath the ice. Something deeper held them together. Something without a face. Something still waiting under the chapel. Noah's jaw opened. It opened wider than human bones should allow. Black water burst from his mouth and flooded across the bedroom floor. Small hands appeared between his teeth. A dead child dragged itself out. Its skin was slick with mud, and a burial shirt clung to its thin body. It fell to the floor without making a sound and began crawling toward Silas. Another child followed, then another. Their limbs bent strangely as they moved. Their mouths remained closed. Water ran from their noses and eyes. Silas kept praying. The first child reached him. A cold hand closed around his ankle. Its fingers squeezed with terrible strength. Silas waited. The other children surrounded him. Then he picked up the shriveled tongue and placed it inside his mouth. Pain exploded through his skull. The dead flesh swelled beneath his own tongue. Black threads moved like worms, pushing through his gums and sewing the new tongue into place. Silas dropped to one knee. Blood poured from his mouth. He choked, but he did not spit the relic out. The next words he spoke were not Latin. They did not belong to any human language. The sound made the walls split. Every window in the bedroom burst outward at once. Glass disappeared into the storm, but rain did not enter. Black water surged through the empty frames instead. It flooded the room in a single violent wave. The water did not drown them. It suspended everything. The bed floated upward. Toys and books drifted through the darkness. Noah's body rose from the floor, his arms hanging at his sides. The crawling children floated around him. Silas remained on one knee, held in place by the iron nails at each corner of the room. Beyond the broken walls, the farmhouse was gone. There was only water. Dark, endless water. Something enormous moved beneath them. It was too large to see fully. Silas caught brief pieces of it as it passed below. A curved shape like a horn, a line of pale eyes, a mouth opening where no mouth should have been. The dead children turned their heads toward it. Silas spoke the hidden name of the thing beneath the chapel. The sound tore the dead tongue in his mouth. Noah screamed. The faces inside him screamed too. The water shook with their voices. Then, beneath all the noise, Noah spoke in his own voice. For the first time since Silas entered the house, he sounded like a frightened 12-year-old boy. "You promised my mother you could save me." Silas looked directly at him. "I promised her what she needed to hear." The children stopped moving. Even the thing below seemed to become still. That was the real exorcism. Not casting evil from a body, not saving a soul. It was destroying hope so completely that there was nothing left for the darkness to hold. The water trembled. Something answered from far below. The sound was deeper than thunder. Noah's body rose higher. His back bent until it looked ready to break. A shadow began pushing out through his mouth. It came slowly, inch by inch. First, 2 long horns appeared, covered in weeds. Then a narrow head without eyes. Then a body made from black water, bones, and moving shapes. The drowned faces in Noah's chest stretched toward it. Elise opened her mouth in a silent scream. The children floating around the room began to break apart. Their skin turned to mud. Their bones became small silver fish. The shadow continued tearing free. Silas held the command together. Blood ran from his nose, ears, and lips. The dead tongue moved wildly inside his mouth, speaking words even he did not understand. Noah looked at him again. His eyes were changing. For one moment, the water disappeared from them. They became the eyes of an ordinary child. "Did you ever mean to help me?" he whispered. Silas did not answer. He did not have to. Noah saw the truth in his face. Silas had never come to save him. The boy was only a door, a way to call the thing beneath the lake, a chance for Silas to correct an old mistake or make a new bargain. Noah's expression changed from fear to understanding. That was worse. The shadow tore free. The room dropped. The black water vanished instantly. The bed crashed against the floor. Books and toys fell from the air. Glass rained across the boards. Noah collapsed beside the bed. The drowned children were gone. Elise's face sank back into the darkness inside his chest, and the black line closed behind her. For one long moment, there was complete silence. Then Noah took a breath. It was weak but real. The bedroom door broke open. Miriam rushed inside and fell beside her son. She pulled him into her arms and pressed one hand against his chest. His heart was beating. He was alive. Relief struck her so suddenly that she began to sob. "Noah," she whispered. "Noah, please look at me." His eyes slowly opened. They were brown again. He looked confused and exhausted. "Mum?" Miriam cried harder and held him against her. Noah's father appeared in the doorway. The rifle fell from his hands when he heard the boy's voice. "Father," Miriam said. She looked up at Silas. Her face was full of gratitude. "You saved him." Silas stood near the broken window. His skin had become pale. His body shook beneath his black clothing. He opened his mouth to answer. Black lake water spilled out instead. It poured down his chin and covered his white collar. Tiny silver fish dropped from between his lips and flopped at his feet. Miriam's smile weakened. Silas raised his head. His eyes had filled with rippling water. Something moved behind them. Still, Miriam looked at him as though he had performed a miracle. People trusted the rescuer even when the miracle was bleeding. Silas turned toward the hallway. He walked slowly out of the room. Neither parent tried to stop him. By dawn, Father Silas was gone. The storm had ended before sunrise. Pale light spread across the dead cornfield, and mist covered the road. Miriam later told the police that she had seen the priest leave the farmhouse barefoot. He had walked into the mud without his coat and headed toward the lake. She called after him, but he never looked back. The officers searched the road, the field, and the edge of the water. They found no footprints. They found no body. The only things left behind were wet church bulletins scattered across the mud. There were dozens of them. Each page had been marked in a child's handwriting. The same sentence appeared again and again, pressed so deeply into the paper that some of the letters had torn through. He knew what was waiting under the water. Noah recovered slowly. For the first few weeks, he remembered almost nothing about the accident or the nights that followed. He slept beside his parents and refused to enter the bathroom alone. Sometimes he woke up crying because he had dreamed of a church beneath the lake. In those dreams, Father Silas stood at the altar. Water filled the chapel, but the candles still burned. Behind the priest, hundreds of drowned children sat quietly in the pews. Silas always turned toward Noah. His eyes were full of black water. His mouth moved, but another voice came out. The voice belonged to something ancient, something that had been waiting beneath the town long before the first house was built. Every time, it said the same thing. Your priest did not cast us out. Then, the drowned children turned their heads toward Noah. He brought us home. Story 5. It started with a blue dot. At exactly 3:14 in the morning, I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating against the wooden nightstand beside my bed. The noise was low but aggressive, the kind of buzzing that seemed far louder in the middle of the night than it ever did during the day. I opened my eyes and stared into the darkness. For a few seconds, I considered ignoring it. I assumed it was an email, a weather alert, or one of those useless notifications that could easily wait until morning. I rolled onto my other side and pulled the blanket closer to my face. Then, the phone vibrated again. I reached for it without turning on the lamp. The screen lit the room with a cold white glow, and I had to squint while my eyes adjusted. The notification said that my brother Leo's location had been updated. I had forgotten that I still had alerts switched on for him. We had shared our locations for years, mostly because our mother worried about us. It had started when we were younger and continued out of habit. Neither of us talked about it much. Still half asleep, I opened the location app. I expected to see Leo's dot sitting over his house on the north side of town. He usually went to bed early, especially during the week. Instead, his blue dot was moving slowly through the industrial district on the south side. I sat upright. The South District was the oldest and ugliest part of town. It was filled with boarded-up warehouses, truck yards, repair shops, and businesses that somehow never looked fully open or fully closed. Even during the day, the streets seemed empty. At night, they were almost completely abandoned. Leo's dot moved along Tanner Road, turned onto East Mill Street, and continued past a row of storage buildings. I stared at the screen, waiting for it to stop. It finally did. The name of the place appeared beneath the dot, Suds and Shine Auto. It was a 24-hour car wash that had been falling apart for as long as I could remember. Half the bays had been closed for years, and the building beside them looked abandoned. People still used it occasionally because the automatic wash was cheap, but no one I knew would willingly go there in the middle of the night. I sat there staring at the map, thinking the same question over and over. Who drives to a nearly abandoned car wash at 3 in the morning? The reason I was watching Leo's location at all was because of what had been happening in our town. 3 girls had disappeared in 6 months. The first was 19-year-old Hannah Price. She had left her evening shift at a pharmacy and never made it home. Her car was found the following morning outside a closed grocery store. Her purse was still under the passenger seat. Her phone was missing. The second girl was Kayla Moreno, 21. She disappeared after leaving a friend's apartment. A security camera recorded her walking alone towards a bus stop, but she never appeared on any of the cameras farther down the street. The third was a 17-year-old high school student named Jenna Reeves. She went out for a late walk after an argument with her parents and did not return. All 3 were young. All 3 were last seen alone. All 3 vanished within a few miles of the industrial district. The police repeatedly told the public there was no confirmed connection between the cases. No one believed them. Parents began driving their children everywhere. Women stopped walking alone after dark. Local businesses installed extra cameras. People shared warnings and rumors online, most of them unsupported and some completely ridiculous. Leo acted more concerned than almost anyone. He printed missing person flyers using his own money. He organized volunteers and search groups. He walked through wooded areas carrying a flashlight, even after the police said those places had already been checked. At the vigil for Kayla, I saw him cry. He stood beside her mother and held her while she shook. I heard him promise that the volunteers would not stop searching until Kayla came home. That was the kind of man I thought my brother was. Leo had always been the one who showed up. When our neighbor's basement flooded, Leo was there with buckets before anyone asked. When our mother needed surgery, he took time away from work and slept in a chair beside her hospital bed. He helped strangers jumpstart their cars and returned lost wallets with every dollar still inside. He cared. At least, that was what I believed. Had anyone told me then that I should be frightened of my own brother, I would have laughed in their face. Looking back, there were warning signs. I ignored them because I loved him. Leo always seemed a little too interested in what the police had discovered. He did not ask questions the way grieving people usually did. His questions were strangely practical. How long would it take officers to begin checking nearby businesses? Could police dogs follow a scent through standing water? Would a phone's location continue to update if it were underground? How long did security cameras usually keep recordings before deleting them? He sometimes asked those things in front of other volunteers. When people looked at him strangely, he smiled and said he was only trying to think of every possible situation. Grief was making him ramble, he claimed. Fear was making him overthink. Because Leo appeared so helpful, everyone accepted those explanations. He also kept telling people that something was following him. The first time he mentioned it was after Hannah disappeared. He said he had been leaving one of the search meetings late at night when he saw a shape reflected in the dark window of a closed shop. It stood behind him, just outside the range of the streetlight. When he turned around, nothing was there. After Kayla disappeared, the stories became more frequent. Leo said he sometimes saw a figure in the reflective glass of office buildings. He described it as tall and thin, with no clear face. It always stood at the edge of security lights, or in the darkness beyond parking lots. According to Leo, it followed him wherever he went. It never approached. It simply watched. He called it the shadow. At first, people treated it as a joke. Then, Leo began speaking about it with such seriousness that some of the volunteers started believing him. A few suggested it might be connected to the disappearances. Leo never directly agreed, but he never discouraged the idea either. That night, as I watched his location sitting at Suds and Shine Auto, I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe he could not sleep. Maybe he had driven there because he was checking another tip. Maybe he had noticed something during one of the searches. I almost placed the phone back on the nightstand. Then the blue dot moved again. It traveled deeper into the property, away from the road, and towards the old service building behind the wash bays. A second later, another notification appeared. Leo has arrived at Suds and Shine Auto. Something about the word arrived made my stomach tighten. Arrived suggested intention. It meant that the car wash was not somewhere he had passed accidentally. It was a destination. I got out of bed, pulled on jeans and a sweatshirt, and pushed my feet into the first pair of shoes I found. I grabbed my keys and left the house without thinking through what I was doing. The streets were almost empty. Rain had fallen earlier, leaving the roads wet and shiny beneath the streetlights. I kept my phone on the passenger seat with the map open. At every red light, I glanced down at Leo's location. His dot did not move. It sat in exactly the same place, deep inside the property. Waiting during the drive, I tried calling him twice. The first call rang until it went to voicemail. The second ended after only one ring. I told myself his battery had died. I did not truly believe it. Suds and Shine looked worse in person than it had on the map. The old sign still glowed beside the road, but several letters were broken. In the darkness, it read, UDS Shine. The remaining letters flickered weakly, turning the parking lot pale blue and then leaving it black again. 3 washed bays stood beneath a rusted metal roof. One bay had been blocked with plastic barriers. Another was filled with discarded machinery. The third remained open. A fluorescent light above it flashed on and off. Water dripped somewhere inside, each drop creating a slow metallic echo. The concrete floor was covered with a thin layer of dirty water that reflected the roof, lights, and walls like black glass. I parked near the entrance and switched off the engine. For a moment, I remained behind the wheel. Leo's truck was parked along the side of the building. The engine was off. The driver's door was closed. I could not see anyone inside. I sent him a message. I'm outside. Are you okay? The message was delivered immediately. He did not respond. I stepped out of my car. The night was colder than I expected. A damp wind moved through the empty bays, carrying the smells of oil, soap, wet concrete, and rust. Leo, I called. My voice echoed beneath the metal roof. There was no answer. As I entered the open bay, I saw my reflection in the glass windows of the service building. The water on the floor stretched and distorted it. My body looked too thin, my arms too long, and my face almost featureless. For 1 second, I thought another figure was standing behind me. I turned quickly. There was nothing there. Then I heard something scrape inside the building. It sounded like a heavy object being dragged across concrete. I followed the noise towards the side of the service building. A narrow metal door stood partly open. A weak yellow light came from inside. Leo? Still no answer. I pushed the door wider. The smell reached me first. Bleach, rust, and something sweet beneath both of them. It was faint, but thick enough to sit at the back of my throat. I recognized it without wanting to admit that I recognized it. It reminded me of meat left too long in a warm kitchen. The room beyond the door looked like an old equipment area. Broken hoses hung from hooks on the wall. Plastic containers stood beside shelves covered in dust. A floor drain sat near the center of the room. My phone suddenly vibrated in my hand. The noise was so sharp that I nearly dropped it. A new notification covered the screen. Leo is now 10 feet away. I froze. I opened the map again. The blue dot was no longer sitting in the bay. It was moving towards mine. Slowly, deliberately, at the same moment, I heard footsteps beyond the wall. One step, then another. They matched the movement of the dot exactly. I stared at the wall separating the equipment room from the next part of the building. Leo? I called again. The footsteps stopped. Silence filled the room. Then the dragging noise returned. I moved the flashlight on my phone across the floor. That was when I saw the rope. It was coiled neatly beside the drain. The ends were dark and stiff, as though the rope had been soaked, dried, and soaked again many times. Beside it lay a stack of missing person flyers. Hannah, Kayla, Jenna. The flyers had been folded carefully in half. They were not scattered or discarded. They had been saved, kept like records or souvenirs. My mind refused to understand what I was seeing. I tried to find a harmless explanation. Perhaps Leo had brought the flyers during a search. Perhaps he had found the rope there. Perhaps someone else was using the building. Then I noticed writing on the back of the top flyer. Times, dates, locations, Hannah's work schedule, Kayla's bus route, Jenna's street. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. I began backing towards the side door. Before I took 2 steps, the phone buzzed again. Leo can see your location. I stared at the words. I did not remember giving him that access. Maybe it had always been enabled. Maybe we had turned it on years earlier and forgotten. Or maybe he had changed the setting himself. I had believed I was watching him. He had been watching me too. Everything rearranged itself inside my mind so quickly that I became dizzy. The searches, the vigils, the questions, the tears, the shadow. It had never been something following him. It was a story, a disguise. He had invented something dark and inhuman, so people would search for a monster in the shadows rather than examine the man standing beside them. Another scrape came from behind the wall. I moved towards the door. Then Leo stepped into the room. He looked almost normal. He wore jeans, dark work boots, and the heavy green jacket he often used during volunteer searches. His hair was slightly wet, and a small drop of water ran from his forehead towards his cheek. The only unusual thing was how calm he seemed. No innocent person would have looked that calm after discovering their terrified sibling in a room containing rope and missing person flyers. He walked into the open bay. The water reflected his face in broken pieces. The dark windows behind him repeated his silhouette across the walls, making it seem as if 3 or 4 versions of Leo were moving together. He noticed me looking. Then he smiled. It was a small, familiar smile, the kind he had used when we were children and he caught me searching for hidden birthday presents. I wondered how long it would take you, he said. His voice was gentle. That made it worse. I looked at the rope. Where are they? Leo tilted his head. Who? The girls. He sighed as though I had disappointed him. You always skip to the ugliest part. Where are Hannah, Kayla, and Jenna? His eyes moved towards my phone. You should not have come alone. I should have run immediately. I wish I could say that fear made me fast and clever, that I recognized the danger and escaped without hesitation. It did not. Fear made me stupid. It made me remain in that room because I wanted one more answer. I wanted him to explain everything in a way that would allow my brother to become my brother again. Why? I asked. Leo laughed softly. He looked down at his reflection in the wet floor. Because people trust the person who helps them search. He raised his eyes towards me. They tell him everything. They give him addresses. They explain their routines. They tell him which streets their daughters use and which friends they visit. My stomach turned. Leo took one step forward. They open doors for him, he continued. They get into his car because they recognize him from the search group. My phone vibrated again. Leo is now 5 feet away. That notification remains clearer in my memory than his face. The blue dot had moved closer to mine. The app was calmly measuring the distance while my brother explained how he murdered people. It felt as though my phone was narrating my death. Did you kill them? I asked. Leo's expression changed slightly. It was not guilt. It looked closer to pride. You already know the answer. What did you do with them? He glanced towards the floor drain. I did not follow his eyes. I could not. The police were looking for someone violent, he said. Someone careless. Some strange man who followed girls at night. They never consider the volunteer who brings coffee. What about the shadow? Leo smiled again. People need something to fear. You made it up, of course. His voice remained calm. Once people believed something had been following me, every unusual noise became proof. Every reflection became a figure. They built the story themselves. You cried at Kayla's vigil. I practiced. The simplicity of the answer hurt more than anything else he had said. I thought about him holding Kayla's mother. I remembered the tears on his face and the promise that he would keep searching.